Right, so here we are. Again, until we figure out how to change the background, we got this rat race. So, hey, go ahead and close your eyes if you want, look somewhere else. And please make a comment because I am monitoring the comments over here. I wanted to go ahead and start speaking each evening, and we'll see how long we can continue doing this, with life's balance. But I brought up a few articles here, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like I can share them in the same manner that I could share my screen before due to limits within my YouTube stream. So what I'm going to do is just kind of highlight a few items as talking points and move forward, which means as I highlight these, my eyes will be off the screen temporarily as this comes up. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the current administration leaves Homeland Security budget flat despite border surge. So here we have a major crisis on many different levels. We've seen that buses are transporting individuals to airports and shuffling them through the United States. We're seeing just a whole ripple of cash envelopes being given. The TRAFFICING that's occurring, the mass movement, the debts that are being created, which is literally indentured servitude within those who get assistance at the border, whether they want it or not. There's a toll for crossing, and they know they're going to get big checks, so that it better be paid, or relatives on the other end are threatened. So it's been very interesting to see the lack of response as the person in charge, the VP, who has been described as monitoring the North American Triangle, has absolutely refused to go to our southern border, absolutely outright refused to participate in that conversation. And yet those in Texas who are most affected are really shouting out and saying, this is America. We need some protections. We want to open our homes and our land and our freedoms, but we can't share when we have nothing, as land and everything is taken. So this is something that really is hitting home here. Also, 12 hours ago, there was an article in Newsweek where Natalie Colarusi was saying man sued and has property seized after leaving negative company review online. A man in Lubbock, Texas, alleges that he was sued and forced to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages after he wrote negative reviews of a specific company online. According to the lawsuit, this person hired a Dublin-based company, the Offline Assistant, in 2015 to assist with various tasks to grow his online business. Getting virtual assistants, whether in the United States or overseas, is extremely common and has been for the last 8 years. Specifically out of the Philippines is one of the prime locations because the English is very, very high. There be virtual assistants, but there's many countries that are stepping up. So while working together, he says that, they go on and it just didn't work out. So he wrote a negative review and was sued in a defamation lawsuit. So, it's really interesting how far some of these lawsuits go, and they're not supporting you or I. This is what's so interesting, as again, I've talked about the Department of Fair Employment and Housing and the EEOC. They're not supporting you and I. And although when I have stood up for so many individuals, it's really baffling that in the same scenario, in the same organization, a multi-trillion-dollar company, a woman not from this country was the janitor, and she cleaned the floor. It was her job to get out the mop and clean it. There's no everybody else. That whole building was her responsibility. She mopped it and then turned around and walked across it, slipped and fell, and hurt her hip and her knee. So what did she do? She sued. What about taking personal responsibility? In this case, she had not mopped it right and walked across it. Anybody knows that if there's a wet floor to avoid it, but the problem is often we don't know it's wet. She clearly knew it was wet because she made it wet. And although she could barely speak English, she got a huge settlement. And more surprising, as I support one person after another and not being removed from organizations when they have filed under a protective activity, she still has a job. And that's wonderful and blessings. That's not the conversation here. But how is it that she's continuing when so many are being removed? So back to this, administration leaves Homeland Security budget flat despite border surge. There is just an absolute, let me dig my head in the sand and sing la 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 while I close my ears and pretend I don't hear you. It's just absolutely baffling with the trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that we know about that's been printed and sent, and the trillions and trillions of dollars that have not even been disclosed to us. And yet, this is just being allowed to happen. So something else that's very interesting right now is Senator Cotton. So this is on Fox 22, Wednesday, May 26 today. Senator Cotton says Dr. Fauci, NIH need to come clean about Wuhan lab funding. Now, why would that be? Now, we all who are awake are fully aware that when the last president chose Mr. F, AUCI, right, to stand next to him, we knew we were setting him up because this person already had a dark path, had been connected to a number of unscrupulous, to say the least, dealings. And we know that by him standing him up there, he was preparing him for a takedown. This was not a buddy that he was putting up there, but he wanted to allow the citizens of the United States to see what had been done. We know that the United States funds a variety of projects globally. We also know that the United States funds universities, which is how they can control the propaganda within the universities. As such, we know that the United States allows different kinds of visa holders to come in through universities and get priority in work permits. Meanwhile, they're giving additional R&D money, research and development money, to these universities. They don't have to disclose it through FOIA's, Freedom of Information Act. And these partnerships are really doing some things, you could say cutting edge. As we saw here, very illicit. And in this case, not only were individuals encouraged here in the United States to participate through these universities, a number of university professors were actually convicted for accepting money in this regard from this particular foreign country. And as they were convicted, they were also caught traveling back and forth many times. And as you might recall, there was an individual out of our neighbor to the north, Canada, who also got in trouble for participating in this love triangle. Now, did we release it? I don't know where we were on that process, but I 100% know that we participated in it. And all around the world, countries are participating in such. And I've got to say, there's one thing to study, do the R&D, and I think that just because you can doesn't mean you should, and certainly doesn't mean that you there's got to be some awareness here. Just because we can build nuclear bombs, we shouldn't be building nuclear bombs. But in the sense here, we didn't release it, at least directly. There is no evidence that we broke into the lab where it was being done and released it to the public. In fact, the individuals who were known to be sick were nationals of that country, not of ours. And so somehow there was a leak from that lab out. However, our media knew this. The evidence was there early on. Our president at the time knew this and relayed the information. And yet look at how the term racism and racist was thrown at him. And subsequent to that, there have been so many attacks on the Asian population out of this, blaming the president for those choices and those words. And that is not where this came from. The media and its propaganda spun this out of control, had the facts, hid it and covered it up, but continued the propaganda against that country. It's really a disgusting shame what's happened out of this. So now, in addition to Rand Paul speaking up multiple times and telling Dr. Fauci to come clean and to tell the truth, now Senator Cotton is also speaking up. He's telling them that NIH needs to come clean about providing funding for the lab in CHINA, as the GOP senator demanded a credible investigation into the origins of cooties. They want an actual investigation. They don't want another impeachment investigation. They don't want another Russian investigation where everything is one-sided and slanted. They actually want a credible investigation. Fair, undisputed, not political, looking at the facts. And somehow our country has moved so far away from understanding the facts, so far away from truth, so far into bearing the story and going down the path of my story for my own history, that we've really lost what it means as a credible investigation or a credible audit. We're very off pace from that. So the next item I want to talk about here is, of course, what's going on in San Jose. Now, as you know, I'm based here in San Jose, California, and my brother works at this yard. In fact, he's very much aware of the individuals involved in today's attack. And the number one thing that he speaks out about, first of all, the VTA, Muni, any of these organizations are highly political, extremely slanted on one. It's embarrassing at best at how slanted these organizations are. And there's a number of prime examples that come up, but they don't do anything unless they get funding from the government, and they will whine and complain that they're not making it. And yet, if I get in my car and I drive to the train station, it'll take about 7 minutes in my car. That's if I hit the 2 lights between here and there. But if I take a bus, it takes a little over 2 hours to get to the train station, to a train station that should be a connection point. It is a disgrace. These are buses that start nowhere, go to nowhere, and circle empty. They ran all through the cooties year empty. In fact, there were signs at every single bus stop saying that unless this is an emergency, go home. So they discouraged people from using them, and they kept them closed and clean. And I think if there were more than 4 people on these extra long buses, then they skipped a stop. They wouldn't even let people get on. And yet, do you know what? By the end of the year of cooties, as 2021 rolled around, I was just really shocked looking out the window and seeing that VTA got all brand new buses. Where the hell did they get the funding from that after not having ridership? Well, I'll tell you, part of those trillions of dollars that was shoveled out at the government level. You know, what's also interesting is schools in our areas were and are still completely shut down. And yet, by end of summer last year, even though they've been shut down and they didn't know when they were going to open, the school bus yard that is right off the freeway on-ramp for Santa Clara County had gotten rid of all of their school buses and replaced it with all brand new, shiny orange buses. Nice, big, long ones, all automatic with great seats and features. Again, where the hell did that money come from? Now, I understand that the budgets are formed years before and money set aside, but no, when there's an emergency like this and you're now trying to protect the children and educate the children, is that where the money goes? People have got to wake up and understand budgets in a process of how much money you have is how much money you allocate to spend. After, of course, taxes, tithing, whatever other category the government wants to dig deep into your pocket, and putting aside some for savings, retirement, often not there down the list as all the other bills need to be paid. So again, this organization is highly political, whines to the government with their hands out. just as does Caltrain and BART in this area. And I do recall about 2 years ago, VTA hired a new head of the organization, and she came in from another area with a very nice package. I want to say it was just shy of about $600,000, where most of these workers are on the front line working with passengers. If they hit somebody, it's the end of their life. The light rail is constantly being used for suicide, where people run out in front of them on purpose. This is a high stress, high demand job, and these individuals get pretty darn close to minimum wage. And yet, this individual who negotiated a package came out here to this area in order to live, is the executive in charge of the organization. Thus, there's usually some assumption of awareness of what the area is like, cost of living, and what kind of job responsibilities are involved. Within just a few months here, she went to the board and had her package changed north, of course. She didn't reduce it, but stated that she needed more money to live in this area, and she demanded it change because she was in charge. How do you have the audacity to get out of bed after you have already negotiated a contract, accepted a role, realized that anyways, it's just a disgrace what happens time and time in this organization. Now, I don't have any comments specifically on the individual who participated in this today, and I'm not going to go down that path, as we will never know all of the facts. We see these left and right in this country, and it's quite sad and disgusting, but the truth of how and why is never a mainstream conversation. So as we dig deeper, it sure would be nice to hear how this went forward, but we can hold our breath on that. But what I can guarantee is this, once again, is striking up gun rights. And this is striking up gun rights in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has already been one of the most restricted areas. During cooties, all of the outdoor ranges seemed to shut down. Yes, outdoor. And then had very limited hours. All the indoor ranges shut down and then got very, very limited areas. But I will tell you, some of the core businesses that not only were able to negotiate hours to open, but had lines around the building and thrived during this period were the gun shops. People saw a need to start protecting their homestead, not necessarily to protect against intruders, although of course that comes to mind when you're defunding the police. Let's be real about that. But primarily the conversation is just my homestead, not going on the offensive, just on the defensive here. How do I protect my young child in a home with all the craziness that's happening out there? So this is going to be the direction that this conversation takes, whether we like it or not. We just lost more rights. So then I want to move on here to a little bit more conversation. Hannity has really, maybe he broke, I don't know, but he has been speaking out quite a bit. And in this case, in addition to talking about President Sippy Cup, he's talking about 23 hours ago on Fox News, Hannity, new evidence on Wuhan lab leak provides proves media mob wrong. So he really goes more into the facts, and most of the facts are the facts he's reviewing from what came out early last year in 2020, where we knew the truth, and then the truth was spun. Yes, these spin doctors are very, very powerful. And as we've seen, not only is the spinning real, but the dog is being wagged. And then what else do we have here? Of course, we are now in the end of May 26th. So the next conversation we have coming up is in June, is we are all waiting for the release of the information of disclosure, right? So December of 2017, we got our initial disclosure. This was a day of freedom, really, for so many of us who've been waiting for this. Now, for those of us who know the truth, we don't need the government to bless it and tell us the truth. We already know. And we already know that in June, we will not get full disclosure. We will not get the truth that Obama was going to introduce somebody from off planet at the same moment that he was accepting his absolutely inexcusable Nobel Peace Prize. But due to threats, he had to pull that back. We're not going to be told all the times that people from off planet have met with our presidents. We're not going to have full disclosure of how many people from off planet are on this planet now. And we are certainly not going to have full disclosure that the Space Force that was created in 2019 and announced by Trump was really a disclosure by Trump, because that Space Force has been around for decades. And that Space Force has a number of people off planet, thousands, tens of thousands. We don't know the number, but we are off planet. And as you look at the core agencies that are launching, whether it's Blue Origin from Amazon, or SpaceX, or Apple, or go right on down the list of these trillion-dollar companies, their technology isn't something they just woke up to one day. It's twofold. One, they've been giving $1 billion of government from DARPA or NIA or some of the undercover agencies within the United States in order to hide the R&D to avoid FOIAs. And in the case, Steve Jobs, I've mentioned many, many times, received $8 billion to develop the first iPhone. That's right. It's not a secure product. All these companies are also off planet. They have a presence off planet. Now, at the least, we know that they have R&D involved in the space station, but I'm talking on other planets. There's quite a bit there of disclosure we're waiting for. We're also waiting for the truth. Remember, Linda Moulton Howe had really been a driver in the research and communication around the cow mutilations, right? The cattle. We never got a full answer on that. Now, for those of us in the community, we know a lot of it is done by the Space Force that's been around for decades, not Trump's Space Force, but the one that's been around for decades, that comes down and manipulates on this planet. But we also know there are individuals who are not human, who are not living off planet, who are participating in human kidnapping and cattle manipulations. Now, for the most part, this day and age, what we have on planet is pretty much our own human race. The military has created technology so far advanced that you and I today cannot even fathom what they've created. And when it shows up in the sky, it is easily misbelieved for something else. And for the most part, a lot of these kidnappings that we're seeing on the, they're also through a Space Force. And in addition to that, we do have, as David Wilcock announced, and I put in one of the earlier reports this week, he finally did it. He finally went there. In the 1950s, there were visitors from those off planet. And there was plenty of documentation that he provided of the friendships, and that they did ask for something in return. In this case, the particular friends that were visiting wanted fresh fruits and vegetables and clothing. And that happened for a while. And then the humans who were participating in these relationships decided maybe not to follow through anymore. A give and take relationship was broken. In addition to that, they were willing to give us all the instructions in order to create powerful technology. And then once they realized that those who had invested and were creating it were in fact creating it for themselves, deal was off. Those from the other planets, for the most part, now when we talk to Dr. Greer, there's a little more conversation here. But in general, those from the other planet who are here to help us. They're here to guide us. They are altruistic. They have raised their levels, and they understand more about serving others. There's a lot of information there that we can glean from and learn from, and they sincerely want to help us and guide us. But there's rules. Just as the deep state needs to go ahead and tell us what they're going to do, and boy, are they bold at telling us. They'll tell us in the movies, they'll tell us even outright. Look at last summer when BIDEN went ahead and told us that he has the strongest, how did he phrase it? The strongest election manipulators on the planet, or however he said that. They'll outright tell you. And then we don't listen, or we don't care, or we are more fascinated in the money or the glitter or the what we're going to get from it, the greed, rather than listening up to the path it's taking us on. And yet, who is one of the most famous of all who has visited us? That's right, that of Jesus, known as Jesus Christ or Jesus of Nazareth or Yeshua. He came with the knowledge and the light to save us, to show us that there's another way. And for those of us who listen, doors are opened, and an ongoing communication and friendship continues to happen. But for many, the doors are shut and the communication is not wanted. And I'll also point back to last October when I drove up to Washington to Isetti Ranch. And I've got to tell you, as much as I prepared for this my whole life, and it was a dream of mine to specifically go up and talk to James and be on that ranch, I participated in a remote viewing class. John is the one who taught that, and just a phenomenal group of people, the peers that I was with. And of course, John did an amazing job. John and Heather. I just want to point out, I was terrified. Every movement, everything, there was so much energy in that space on that land that it is overwhelming. That as I walked and thoughts would come into my head, things would actually be created right in front of me. I would see things minutes before they happened. And of course, one evening we looked up at the mountain at Mount Adams. And as James sat there talking to us, and our group sat there just kind of looking up at the movement of all the very, very interesting lights in the sky jetting back and forth in ways that our current technology known to man is not there. We all witnessed the portal opening up on the side of Mount Adams. And in itself, it just seemed like a light, and you'd think there's a hiker over there. You can't hike on that mountain, and you can't sleep on that mountain. And yet, in the same spot that we had been witnessing before, the portal opened. And those of us who got images of it, it was kind of like an octagon shape. However, instead of being true lines of an octagon, it was like I'm sketching it out right now as I'm phrasing this. It was kind of like a rope or a chain, the way that a rope is braided and weeded together on the outside, and it was massive. And some said that they could see inside. I did not have that privilege. But what I did see, whatever energy created that portal shot right to each of us standing there, and it came right out to us. And the images and the videos that evening were amazing. The power and the strength of what happened. And that night there was a lot of movement of beings on the land. There's a lot out there that we don't understand. And just because we don't understand it does not mean it doesn't exist. And there's a lot out there that is trying to hurt us and is hurting us. There's a lot out there that is controlling and driving greed, racism, pain, and suffering. But based on my experience, there's a whole lot more who are out there helping us, guiding us. And when we are in silence and we look forward and we just ask a question, it is absolutely amazing the answers that are provided to us. We are being guided. Our DNA is very, very important to this universe. And as I've said before, we know how this book ends. For those who choose the path of light, it ends in absolute beauty. And for those who have been given the choice and choose the other way, they're allowed to go the other way. So here we go. This is 30 minutes ago on Politico. Ex-official who revealed UFO project accuses Pentagon of disinformation campaign. Now, this is being brought up like it's new news. We're going to see a lot of twists and turns from the media as they try to cover this up, make it smaller than it is. Only give us 1% of the report that's coming out next month. The reduction of the truth, and then the manipulation, as we've all been told, all the way from the creation of NASA, that in fact, the next big event we will have on this planet will be unidentified flying objects on a massive scale in our skies. However, we have been warned over and over and over again, these will be used as a scare tactic and a manipulation, just as the false flags have been. They will actually be of our own, trying to manipulate us, as those who are there against us are not going to choose that method. They have the control they need. But in order for our own military and government and the deep state to get stronger, they will gladly produce and show and threaten. So as Luis Elizondo and other officials speak forward, we need to listen to the truth that we can get out of this. This isn't about discrediting or mocking, and it's certainly not about conspiracy theories anymore. We've moved way beyond that. We are not alone on this planet, and we have never been alone on this planet. And as soon as we can get over that and tie into the true power of being human and the power that our DNA has, we don't have junk DNA. We have DNA that's turned off. And as we open up our minds and work together through love and support, the planet shifts. And if you want to rise with Mother Earth, you better shift with it. So back again, as we're talking about borders, it sure would be nice to live on a planet that has no borders. But for the reason that this is being pushed, you can't give what you don't have. In a year of being absolutely devastated, we have seen what it means. And this just isn't working. There will be no winners from this open border conversation. And long term, it's going to be very, very harmful for those families and individuals, and especially the children that were used as bait to come across the border. There's a lot of pain and a lot of money coming through there. It's not the solution. So as the current administration leaves Homeland Security budget flat, we see bigger problems being created. Inflation, lack of jobs, a stress on the social system, and a lot of cash going in multiple directions that isn't free. It's got to be paid for. And once again, I'll wrap this up with, of course, Senator Cotton asking Dr. Fauci of NIH to come clean. These people have an opportunity. They've lied to us for over a year, almost a year and a half. They have shut down our country. They have shut down opportunities. They have caused massive suicides. The destruction has been far and wide. And yet we're starting to ask, will you come clean? What about jail time? Why is this individual still working? Why isn't his retirement taken already? And yet that's not on the table. Meanwhile, we have the blessing right now of having Rachel Maddow explain to us what a grand jury is and what it'll do to devastate, as some might say, our former, and I'd say our current president, that is ripping into past dealings years and years ago, as big as and wide as they can, to absolutely devastate this human being who did nothing more than stand up for you and I in this country. And you know the power of his strength, because if you look at what the ripple of a family does through generations, you can quickly see the stature of the man. So there's two individuals in history. One individual said that it is really important to let your children be free to do what they do what they want to do, to follow main culture and be involved in mainstream. And there's one individual who spoke up and said that no, that's not the way. Children, young adults need some structure and guidance. And that structure and guidance is found in the fear of the Lord. And by following the Lord our God and having the fear and understanding the 10 basic commandments and practicing those every day, and treating thy neighbor as thyself and not coveting what others have, and not just write down the list, that there is a different set of trajectory opportunities for that family than the other. So we look back to the man who wanted to have just freedoms left and right. And it was something like 911 of his descendants ended up in prison. 38 had murdered other people. And it just went down the list of the stats. But this individual who said, no, we don't need to give our children ultimate freedom. We need to be guides for them, model and show them the Lord our God and the power, and follow basic rules. They had, I believe it was 19 of them became priests and pastors and served in the church and helped guide others as leaders in our world. Back to Gentleman A. There were a whole bunch of politicians that came out of that family. And none of them stood up for anyone but themselves. The greed progressed. Versus the pastors and priests of this other family who had the solid foundation, who understood the importance of giving and sharing. There's different paths that are created by what we teach our children. And unfortunately, what's being taught in schools right now via the propaganda of hating one another, of racism, is the most peak that I've ever seen. And it's absolutely disgusting as you talk about every skin color there is, including white male. Some point this has got to stop. Now, this reminds me, Nancy Reagan stepped forward and said, just say no to drugs. And drugs really became a forefront. In fact, other presidents moving forward had entire agreements with the CIA as they shipped the drugs right on into this country. And look what happened with the Sackler family with the opium crisis that had the largest indictments ever just a year ago, January. And yet during the time when she was saying, just say no, another individual who happened to be the descendant of the Baskin-Robbins fortune stood up and said, just say yes, and had an organization called Yes that still exists today. And Yes identifies leaders around the planet and empowers those leaders. Because let me tell you, leaders in any country are the same. They are brought down and denied by their family, brought down and denied by the village who raised them, and Often leaders don't have the proper guidance and encouragement to go the next step, but leaders stand up anyways. And the majority of true leaders on this planet, I don't mean dictators, but true leaders on this planet who listen and identify those with strengths better than them and more powerful than them, raise them up above and have no fear of the strength around them because they stand for greatness. Most of them on this planet have been murdered, removed from this planet. And for that we pray. 100% we're in prayer for this man who served us from 2016 to 2020 and continues to have our heart in this place. And the reason I talked about the two families is, again, you can see the quality of a person by the way their child treats them. Now, how does BIDEN's children treat him? You can see from the videotapes, from the news, the media, the type of the children that he has spawned off. And yet at the same time, look at the absolute reverence and respect that Mr. T's children give him. They look at him with wonder. They are so proud of their father, and he is very proud of them. He has raised wonderful leaders in this world, and he has given them the wings to fly with. He even trusted them so much that he brought them into the White House as his trusted guides. That shows a lot of respect for a father from his children and children to their father. I haven't heard too much about what's his name in the White House, but I haven't heard so much about anyone in the White House right now. So as we look at different data points, you can find the truth. The truth is right there and open. And we all know the truth, but it's really important step by step that we are reminded day by day. Just as I mentioned that at this point, Costco, Walmart, Trader Joe's, and Homes, Lowe's have all announced that they now have a no mask policy. If you want to wear one, that's fine, but you don't have to wear it in their stores, and they're not going to ask you or force you to leave if you don't have one on. And yet today, as I went into a Walmart to make a return, I was told by multiple people I would not be served unless I put on a mask. And even after I showed them the article that I had a screenshot on my phone for them to look at, they just informed me that that store was choosing to make up their own rules. Let's not go back to the time of the Nazis. Let's step forward for freedom. Now, at this point, I'm going to leave you with, actually, there's two more points here. I remember when I was a child, I'd like to say maybe second or third grade. I've gone back many times to look for it, and I have not found it. So if you do find it, I'd love to see it. But I remember there was a 60-minute story, and they had interviewed these two gentlemen, and one, it was an executive of Coke, and I don't remember the name or the title, but he was an executive in the Coca-Cola organization, and he was really well respected in that organization. And they did quite a bit looking into his life and his story and how he got to that role. And the other gentleman was on death row. And they did quite a bit of looking into how that person got on death row. Now, the interesting thing is these two were brothers. And in conclusion, they asked them each the same question. How do you think you got to this point in life? And what's interesting is both brothers gave essentially the same answer. The one who was the Coca-Cola executive spoke up just as proud as could be. And he said, with a father like mine, what else could I have become? Well, the person on death row gave about the same answer. With a father like mine, what else could I have become? The second brother was on death row next to his father, who was also on death row, and living up with the same scenarios and growth experiences One chose a path of leadership, and one chose to follow in the shadow as his father. And as we see what's going on in the families and the representation of our leadership, what are the next steps in the next generations that are going to come out of this? So here I want to wrap it up then with this final thought for this evening. Mark Victor Hansen is the author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And I had the pleasure of being mentored by him. I think we're looking at maybe around 12 to 14 years ago now. Wonderful, wonderful man, always had a smile on his face and a laughter. And there was one point that he and his co-mentor, Robert Allen, shared with us, and I'll never forget. There's different lessons in life that we learn. And they told us that there's two doors in life. There's one door marked freedom, and there's one door marked security. And if you can just close your eyes and imagine the door marked freedom and the door marked security. And they were adamantly clear that those who choose freedom have unlimited opportunities and possibilities in their life. And there is no safety net for that. You can far, far, far and fast. And yet you can jump right back up again and bounce onto another opportunity. But those who choose security, they were adamant. Those people end up losing it all. It is now 2021. Where is your retirement? Okay, blessings, everybody. As we wrap this up, have a beautiful evening.